and welcome back. So far we've gone through lean startup, design thinking, blue ocean strategy. How do these ideas fit together in order to help us define the problem we're looking to solve and then lead to a sort of an MVP type product, a prototype that will allow us to then test with the market to see whether the market or indeed the customers that we've already found and spoken to within our customer development process, whether they're actually interested in that product and be that ready to buy, or indeed we're ready to give further feedback for us to refine this a little bit further. Of course, then moving on to blue ocean strategy, which allows us to see that sort of element between essentially differentiation and making sure you're different from the competition, and an idea that perhaps won't always be at the forefront of your mind when you're starting out, but essentially should be there in the back of your mind as you keep progressing forward, bringing out new features, trying to solve new problems. What I want to introduce here is the idea of data analysis, data collection, and often through a tool such as Excel or Google Sheets, if that's what you prefer to use. One thing I really want to get clear here is that in this video now that we're going to do, I see very little point in me sharing screen and going through Excel. There are indeed videos in here which will give you the basics. I found a couple of really interesting ones on YouTube, which take you right from beginner through to fairly intermediate. And so if that's something that you're interested in and want to do, then that's something that you can do. But what I really want to get out of this session today is to focus on why data analysis or indeed Excel can be actually useful, i.e. why would you actually use the tool of Excel or Google Sheets in order to help you in your business. So we live obviously in a world that's full of data, and so being able to analyze data is very, very helpful. But I think that it's important to work out why we're analyzing data or why we're using a method of data collection. Now, when I say the word data, I assume that a lot of you will have immediately thought to numbers, but it's not only numbers that we collect in Excel. For example, all of your customer feedback that you could take and that you could essentially bring down, perhaps you're writing on Word or you're collecting that even just by writing, you might then want to collect that all into Excel. And so you could have every single line or as many lines as you need, which essentially have the certain amount of feedback. And then what you can do is you can group that feedback. So it might have been that they didn't find a particular feature that interesting, or what did they rate a particular feature out of 1 to 10? And then you can start to graph that and start to have a look at where the trends are. So that's one place that you can do it. Similarly, if we're looking down here, where can Excel really be used? So one of the areas you can use is essentially through a market sizing exercise. Now, what do I mean by market sizing? You're looking to get into a particular space. You think that there's an opportunity there, and you just want to sit down. You want to put some numbers together just to try and work out how much spend there is in that particular market. So let's say you're looking at the online education business, which is focused in entrepreneurship, for example. You might want to have a look at the number of people that might be interested in taking a course like that. What price would you be able to put it at? How much would you need to sell in order to cover your costs? And you can do some simple functions using Excel to allow you to get there. Similarly, you might be selling 5 products. You've got product 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you want to, over the course of that month, find out which products were being sold on which particular days. And so then you can see, actually, we did really well with this product after maybe pushing it with a bit of a particular marketing campaign. But then also we found that product 4 sold really well and product 5 only really sold well. When we collate them all together, we actually only sold well in November, for example. And you can start to prioritize products based off that. You might be getting, indeed here, number 3, a number of customer queries. So what are these what questions are customers asking repeatedly? And you can start to mark these up, just have them again in a simple column, and the number of queries that you got around that particular subject over the course of that month. And that might be the time for you then to say, actually, at the time when we were getting those queries, it didn't really occur to me, but now having looked at the data, I can see that actually it's time to change. Similarly, we might also want to be able to look at pricing. So we might say, look, we think we can sell 10 of these apples at £1 per apple. Right. And if we do that, that will give us a total of £10. But indeed, what about if we were to sell these apples at £2? Well, then we'd only need to sell 5 of those apples to also get £10. So do we think that actually we might be able to sell 7 at £2 or 10 at £1? And then those will obviously give you different figures, right? If you're selling 7 at £2, but you're selling 10 apples at £1, then in terms of overall revenue, you're going to make more revenue with if you're able to sell those 7 apples. So this is really looking at, what about if we change price and we change quantity, what's going to happen to our total revenue that we're looking at? The 5th area you might use Excel for is things like financials. So putting together, and this is perhaps a little bit further onwards, what about if you're putting together a balance sheet, an income statement, a cash flow statement? What are these statements? These are financial statements. We can go into more detail if that's of interest to you. And these are financial statements that companies will put together, generally done by accountants. Or if you're a larger company, you might have an in-house financial function that will do this. But essentially, you want to put together some financials. So you can essentially look at what cash is coming into the business and what cash is going out of the business. Now, you don't need to follow those statements and use Excel just for those statements, but really simply in financials, what about our expenses? So can we log all of our expenses per month that we're doing, so that at the end of the year, you can then give those expenses either to your accountant or to whoever does your accounts, or simply you can have a look at what's going out of your business, what you're spending on. And if you look in this particular part of the course, you'll have templates where you can actually see, for example, an expenses template. So all you'll need to do is fill in with your particular details, and you can therefore you can then already have a pre-made template that you might want to use. Similarly, on those financials, you might be wanting to say, well, actually, I don't have a huge billing or automatic invoicing system that I'm willing to pay for at the moment. Well, you could simply use an Excel sheet where you've got all of your particular clients, how much they need to be billed, when they need to be billed, have they been billed, what's the invoice number, those sorts of things. And Excel is a really good way of actually bringing that in together. So depending on what you're looking to get out of Excel, I think that some of the key advice that I'd say take away here, number one is scalability. So smaller organizations don't necessarily have access to lots or essentially reams and reams of data, but you want to make sure that your analysis is still thorough. And this can really be used, especially if you're really into use of data, then Excel can be really, really helpful to help you start to analyze certain markets and help you make those next steps, make those decisions off the back of the information that you've collected. Now, let's always make sure what we're keeping in mind is, as we go through this blueprint, this handbook, this course, what we're thinking about is, how can these aren't separate modules that is necessary that we're going through. We can use Excel when we're taking customer feedback through using things like lean startup and design thinking. And in that build, measure, learn feedback loop, this is where we're starting to measure, right? And we can use Excel for that. Similarly, if you're deciding to actually take your startup and build it a lot higher, or if you're working for a startup, then lots of investor decks will require some analysis of the revenues and financials. Excel can be used for this. One thing I'd say to be wary of is don't get too bogged down in what we call analysis paralysis, right? Use it to the extent that it helps you to make that decision and then move on. You don't necessarily need to keep on going through, what about if this happens and if that happens, etc. You can, of course, but quite often you want to make sure that what's the key point that we're trying to take out of here. And the final one is this fear of Excel. So some people, if you're not comfortable with numbers, and I'm not the most comfortable with numbers in the world, of course, but there is this fear that I can't use Excel because I wasn't very good at maths. Now, Excel isn't just about maths. Indeed, it can help you depending on what you're looking to do. But don't fear Excel. If you can even just get the basics right, then you can find that it can be really, really helpful and useful as you're moving forward. So, as mentioned before, I've put this in. If you want to have a quick go through where you from beginner, an introduction to Excel, and then intermediate, there are a couple of videos that I found on YouTube. I thought they were really helpful because it essentially is a continuation of the same video, and that means that obviously you'll have already, within the beginner part, have already got your initial data sets set up, and it really does take you from 0 here to 1. And then the immediate stages is essentially taking you a little bit further. One thing that's really key and perhaps worth starting with is the Excel ribbon. Now, what do we mean by the ribbon? When you log on to Excel, or indeed on PowerPoint or Word or Google Sheets or whichever you're using, the ribbon is essentially that option tool at the top, which allows you to pick different, maybe different styles of font, different borders, and anything that you might want to change on Excel. And it's worth getting comfortable with that ribbon. So very, very quick video here, just essentially to round off, right? If you are getting stuck on Excel, one of the best things to do is just to use Google. Google is a fantastically useful tool. Whatever level you are, type your question to Google, and often there's a video on there to help you go through, and you will naturally work it out. You just need a little bit of perseverance on that. So I'd say, for those who are really, really interested in it, then it's a great thing to get stuck into and to do in your own time as well, to try and understand how it works, how the functionality works, because it's an incredibly useful tool. But similarly, if you're not a fan at all of it, then I've put certain templates in here which might be helpful for you as you're starting to go on your entrepreneurial journey. And I encourage you to make full use of that. And there's a lot of links between Excel and Google Sheets. So whichever ones you're using, then it's worth knowing both. But once you know one, they're very, very similar and quite interchangeable.